We'll go full screen here. I appreciate that introduction. You did it better than me. I, I
That's
would
true
say
website.
I would say this talk was really hard for me to put together. Like I had been thinking about this all summer long and like how to talk about ggpal2. And then I was like, well, maybe I want to talk about chores. And then when I started thinking about a chores talk, I was like, well, there's still a prerequisite step to like add a little chunk of Elmer into this talk. So I think really what I'm trying to do is talk a little bit about Elmer to discuss what chores is doing. And then from there, pivot into ggpal2. And then by the end of it, you'll know more about like how to build your own chore from scratch, but also how to use ggpal2. So that's the agenda. Um, we'll start off with Elmer, just a really simple example, but I don't know if everyone was coming from the AI group or the GG extenders group, so I wasn't sure like who knew what Elmer was, and if anyone that's used Elmer or hasn't used Elmer. Um, but Elmer is a really slick toolkit to basically interact with LLMs, and you can do this from your R scripts. You're basically talking to an LLM that's hosted by an LLM provider. So an LLM provider might be Anthropic or OpenAI, or if you're hosting it locally, that would be a Llama. There's a few other local interfaces as well. Or maybe you're trying to interact with Gemini. And I think everyone's kind of done these things without Elmer, whether it be on your phone or through an application installed on your computer or just through your web browser. Like that's typically how people would talk to an AI. And maybe you're like coding a lot with your AI, asking it tons of coding questions. Um, really, Elmer's nice for that. So it allows you to add tools to any chat. So like any kind of R function that you want to build or a base R function, you can assign that and give that to the chat bot to basically use that. There's also this structured data, so kind of returning data in like a structured form. Um, so really, Elmer skips the step of you needing to leave your IDE and go to this other application, and then maybe you're copying and pasting things back and forth. So you don't have to do that anymore. So that's really what Elmer is. Diving right into Elmer here. If I was going to talk to a local model and I wanted to build some ggplot code, this would basically be a simple design with Elmer to initiate a chatbot. So I just have Elmer chat Olama. This could be Gemini, Mistral, any kind of other provider. If you look at Elmer, that package lists probably like 10 to 20 different providers that I've never even heard of. But really, you're going to give that a model. So each provider has different sets of models, OpenAI different than Anthropic. Um, so I have DevStroll installed on my computer. So I can give it a system prompt to be like, hey, you're just an expert ggplot coder, and I just need you to revise plot code into ggplot code. So super simple, but it gives you a lot of information. I take that instance that I just created, this chat. I'm going to chat with that instance. I'm going to give it some code or text or anything. This is just a code snippet. And then it returns all this information, which is really nice. So Elmer's really useful if you're going to be like building from your IDE or if you're like coding in R and you want to use something like this. I think in Python, there's a sister package called chatless. So something else that you can kind of do from your IDE. So what this did was it outputs, it says like, sure, like I'll create a scatter plot using ggplot2. It creates this code chunk that's fenced, which we can come back to that later. Um, and then an explanation. So it's telling me like everything that's going on here. But, sometimes I just want the code. I want what's in the fencing. So that might be where you'd start to look into ggpal2. But we'll get into that later. Um, you know, this is awesome. Like this is how the Cries, the Kuzco, the fungi packages, they all work built on top of Elmer. So they're like layers of system prompts and tools. And then also like telling the model to return structured data. But like there's still like this missing piece if I actually want to use Elmer to just code or like iterate through my code. I'm still, if I go back this slide, I created this translation, but then now to run this code, I'm gonna have to like copy and paste it outside of these fencing. So um, I could fine tune my system prompt, but still then I would be copying and pasting. So like, what if we want to edit our code directly now? I feel like this slide is just like throw a bunch of stuff at you and like scare you a little bit because it's like, where do I begin if I actually want some like coding assistance? And I'm just like an R programmer and I just use RStudio. Like there's all these different places to go. There's like these VS Code IDE extensions, Root, Client, Continue. There's these like AI development environments, Cursor, Windsurf, anti-gravity. There's agent development environments, Letta. There's all these AI tools too that coming from pods like Positron Assistant and Databot. And then now I'm just like stressed out. I'm like, there's like too much. So I found out about chores, and that's what is the kind of the minimal place to start. I feel like it's a low barrier if you want to start testing out, building out your own AI assistants. Um, so what are chores?
Simon
Any kind of,
is on the call, by the way. I don't know if you saw
I'm,
the Simon Couch, author of Chores, is with us today.
oh, okay. I looked through the attendance before I started talking. I didn't see him. Um, that's awesome.
Mhm.
So now we could get to do a name shout out. So what I was going to say here is like, there's so much going on, but I do like spy on a few software engineers and see like what they're working on in their free time. And Simon Couch is one of those few people. And I noticed that he built this package called Chores, which I thought was really cool. Um, Simon, I don't know if you want to say anything about Chores.
No, happy to be here, and happy to hear that it's a nice entry point.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like another thing, like Simon builds so many AI packages that like I felt like Chores is like one of those ones that kind of like snuck through and like if you didn't pay attention, you lost it. So he's building all these awesome tools for Posit. Those are interacting with RStudio, Positron, etc. Um, but yeah, Chores is like one of these things where it's like I have this repetitive task and I need to get it done, but it's not something that I can really put in a function or really automatable. So um, really it's a shortcut and it's built on top of Elmer. So if you know how to use Elmer, which is just system prompts, so you could test your system prompts with Elmer. If you have a nice system prompt for some task that you're trying to automate, basically you would want to register that with chores. And then with chores, it's an add-in to your IDE. You can run this shortcut Control Alt C, and that will open up a little GUI that has a list of your chores that you can choose from. And that's kind of like the main thing that chores add in is then the chores themselves. There's three different types of chores that you can do. There's a replacement chore and a prefix and a suffix. I'm not really sure if there's actually, I've looked around and I'm not sure if there's any suffix chores that exist yet. So a challenge for everyone on this call. I think that there's quite a few replacement chores. That's what ggpal2 is you're basically highlighting code or some sort of natural language to replace it. But we can see a little example here. I actually took it from the README of chores. So this is from Simon Couch. So this displays an example. We're able to see both a replacement and a prefix chore, which is really cool. Is replacing rlang with CLI with the first call, and then the second call, he's creating a Roxygen header. So if you ever created your own Roxygen or inserted your own Roxygen, you're typically filling in the information for each parameter. Right now, you're basically, instead of doing that, allowing the AI to look at the function itself and based on the context, try to fill in those parameters, and then you can just go back and edit them where needed. But it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So I'm sorry, I need to try to move this. So basically, trying to move my layout. Sorry, I have half of my text blocked right now. I'm not sure if y'all can you all read it?
We can read it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well then I'm just gonna wing it. So really like what chores is it's like basically leveraging these prompts. So really you need to fine tune any kind of system prompt. That's basically what the key is for building any kind of chore. Um, if you are going to kind of test out what I had before, oops, there we go. Like this system prompt here, you are an expert in ggplot2 code. Please revise any plot code as a ggplot2 code. I think the next thing after we saw that output would be do not tell me about the code, be concise, only share the code itself, do not put any brackets around it. So that's kind of the key whenever you're kind of building out a chore. You want that just that code. Um, and I guess if you're doing like a Roxygen prefix chore, you would label it a little differently. But if you're going to be doing some sort of replacement chore that's replacing code in particular, you definitely want to add that to the system prompt. So that's where you're basically kind of iterating, and it's nice to start with Elmer. So that way you're not trying to re-register over and over your system prompt to chores. You basically are testing a system prompt separately. And then from there, you really go into the options and set what model you want to use for chore. Um, and you definitely typically want to use a larger model. I've tested a lot of local models and I've tried to get like a 7B model to produce good code. It can sometimes include the backtick still, and you're like, I listed that like 3 times in the system prompt. Like, why are you still including the backticks? So I definitely would like, if you're actually going to use this in production, you definitely want to lean towards a cloud hosted model. So I show the example below to whether or not you want to set your model to be like a local model. I had some decent results with 5.4. But then if you want to do a cloud-based model, I typically use Mistral or Gemini. Gemini has like a free tier, so I think that's pretty useful, especially for this ggpal2. Um, and another thing about the free tier with Gemini is like it'll use your data to train Gemini too. But in this case, I'm like, I would love it to learn more about ggplot2 code. So I'm going to send it code snippets of ggplot2 all day long and like have it revise and build better ggplot2 knowledge. So then, once when you have that system prompt working as you would expect, kind of like sandboxing it inside of Elmer, I would save it as a markdown and then register that to chores. There's a few different ways to do that. So I include this link, like definitely refer to the chores article custom. This will allow you to kind of build out your own custom chores. So these don't have to be packages. They could just be files that you have stored out on a folder. And you just want to register those at the top of your script each day you run those. Like you can do that. You can have a list of, 50 different chores. And maybe you only use 20 of them for one project versus another. So you can kind of break that out and not really package every single chore that you build. So it's pretty cool. Um, so now, we're going into like finally what ggpal2 is. And I have this funny little piece of information here. Like anytime you're trying to extend a package, like I was just trying to figure out within this instance, it was just a punny name. Like it was ggplot2 plus pal, and just came into a portmanteau of ggpal2. Um, but really, the other thing I was kind of curious, Simon, since you're on the call, like what prompted you to change the name of pal? Was there already one registered to like crayon or something, or did you
Yeah,
just want to ruin my pun?
totally swiped that out from under you, didn't I? Um, Yeah, so we had used PAL in the first couple months on the repo, and then just before submitting, I learned it wasn't on Crane or Bioconductor, but another package registry. Somebody had used the name PAL for a good while, and so even though we probably could have snuck it by on Crane, figured it was probably best to come up with another name. So chores is thanks to Davis Vaughn. We had a Slack thread of a bunch of folks in the Tidyverse team trying to come up with something. And I thought that was a nice way to suggest like have AI do stuff that you don't like to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's kind of like you still want to do the things you find fun, but yeah, have AI kind of automate these tasks that feel like taking out the trash or folding clothes, like just build my ggplot really quickly. I just need the scaffolding and kind of like fill it in, or same with like the Roxygen header, which is really neat. Well, I didn't know that history about chores, but that's really cool. If it had been named chores at the beginning, I probably would have went with a different package idea altogether. And I've thought about that for a few weeks too, like what I would even do. I was thinking maybe like a janitor package that does like clean names and stuff that I end up always adding back to my code chunks anyway. Um, but yeah, that's interesting story. Um, so yeah, the what is this? It is a replacement chore. And the cool thing, I after a lot of testing with the system prompt, it's actually three different types of system prompts in one. Um, so say like you don't know how to program in ggplot2 at all, or you don't even know how to build a plot with base R, you could just type in just regular natural language, highlight it, and then that will get replaced with ggplot2 code. Um, the same thing will happen if you have a base R plot, or this should work with any plot really, like a plotly. um, and convert that to a ggplot2 code. And then the last piece is like, say you're going over someone's ggplot2 code and they do some weird stuff. Like I do weird stuff all the time. Like I'd put my aesthetics in my geoms. Just gonna put that out there. I'm sure that drives people insane. But I never really put the aesthetics up in the ggplot call. I don't know why. I always like have data piped into ggplot. It's empty. And then when I'm adding geoms, I do my aesthetics. But I don't think that's just my style. So like I think what the grammar graphic style would prefer the aesthetics inside of ggplot, that call. And then the other thing is like just making sure your plots are accessible, using like a colorblind friendly color palette. So that's the third kind of replacement chore that it'll do for your ggplot. So if you actually go and look at the repo, there's no code at all. Like I think I have a ZZZ to like register the chore, and then I had to create like a an R script to document something, or else the R package won't build. I'm pretty sure I had to just like kind of document what the package does inside of R script just to make it work. But really, all it is inside of this inst prompts. There's this markdown ggplot2 um, replace. So if you ever want to like get an idea or like clone this repo or like just take that as a starting place, just rip that markdown out of there. That's a good idea. Just like start with if you wanted to test out like how to format one on your own. I think Simon Couch has some um, good ones listed. I just said it. I said his name like he wasn't here, and I just forgot he was here. So Simon has some listed inside of chores as well. So like you can get some other examples. Um, but to get an idea of like the core prompt, I built this a few different ways and I iterated on it a few times. And then I had Gemini actually rewrite the whole system prompt. And it did a really good job. Like it did, I don't know what it is about Gemini, but it's really good about telling other AIs what to do. So if you ever are like needing help on your system prompt in particular, I've been using Gemini as a system prompt tool. So like Gemini 3, it writes most all of my system prompts for me. So I think in the summer I refactored ggpal2 to use Gemini's, and I've been having way better results than my system prompt that I wrote. It's a lot more wordy, there's a lot more going on, but it split this into basically core principles, and the core principles are like style and format and best practices. So like output always and only with the R code, don't include your backticks. I try to do other things like when I had it revise my system prompt is like follow tidyverse style, use a native pipe, um, you know, mapping the aesthetics inside the main ggplot call. These kind of things I kind of let Gemini know and then had it reword everything for me. So this being kind of the core principles, and then we have the operational scenarios. So this is the three different types of replacements. And it's really important to share an example input and output for these models to work well. So I found out for the chores in particular, having an example output for it to review is really helpful for the LLM, or else, it might mess up or include the backticks or like send you something that you didn't expect at all. So I have an example of three types. This first one's just translate non-ggplot code, giving it an example using base R, and then an example output of how I would like that to look. And then the next one is kind of more natural language process. So like, what if I just put in a comment into my script and highlighted that comment. Could I replace that comment? And you can do that too. So that's the second kind of replacement. And then the third replacement is a refactor. So um, someone puts in this ggplot code where they're assigning data and um, they have the AES in here, and then they have an aesthetic call over here in geom point, which is this kind of confusing to have multiple aesthetic calls. So the output just pushes all the aesthetic calls into ggplot. So and then it also improves labels. That's another thing that it does too. So I think like GG title, I think that's something that I used when I first started using ggplot. I'm not sure if that's normal or not, or if that's just kind of like a introductory helper or function or something like that. But I think like a lot of times nowadays, especially if you're going to be labeling everything on your plot, I think labs is the best. So like labeling title, subtitle, X, Y axes, and your palette too. So kind of like final remarks is like just remember to test out things first with Elmer before you start registering a bunch of system prompts and kind of like going mad trying to get rid of the backticks. Like that was my problem, especially with the local models where I started. The local models just kept on putting backticks, and I could not get rid of the backticks. I said it like 3 times over, like do not put backticks in there. And then providing output examples. I didn't realize how powerful that was until I added that. Um, and then, the output is always based off of that system prompt, your example that you give it, and then the LLM. So all three of those moving pieces really changes the code that you receive in return. So um, those are kind of my lessons learned for sure. And then coming back in the summer after I started this maybe January, February of this year, and then June or July, learned a few new things. Just came back and had Gemini refactor the system prompts. I should have just started with brainstorming with Gemini in the first place. And then lastly, I'm sorry for everyone that starts with ggpal2 to like try to figure out how this library works. Just like go to chores and like read about chores first, and then you'll kind of get a gist of how ggpal2 works. So, and thank you for having me. I guess I can show like just really quickly what ggpal2 could do. Um, I was kind of planning for this, but not really. Like create a plot of, I'm sorry guys, this iris data. So Control Alt C. I have this ggplot here. I hit that, and it gives me code pretty quickly. This is either Gemini or I think it is Gemini. I was gonna say maybe I had Mistral set up right now, but I think sometimes I switch those two back and forth on chores, but this should be Gemini. Um, but yeah, I think it's really nice to have your X and Y axis labels filled out for you too. But one thing I would go back and check is like unit of measurements and stuff like that. It'll fill in unit of measurements just because that's kind of like ideal, but just double check, make sure it's not something wonky. But yeah, that's pretty much it, unless anyone wants to see another example here in my R studio.
That would be great, Frank.
Okay. Yeah, here.
Yep.
Let's see.
Curtis is saying the same thing in the comments here.
Okay. I wish I would have pre-compiled some of these.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay. The base hours. Yes, and Barrett is saying again, again, with a lot of
Okay.
thumbs up.
Yeah. So you select a plot. It replaced it with this. Looks a little bit different. Um, but yeah, your answer can change each time you run an LLM, even with the same exact quote. Like, let's go back. There's data. Use Paradis with magma settings. I don't know if that'll actually work for this or not, but we'll see. That's typically something I would go through and add at the end. But yeah, so you can if you do, I like the natural language process kind of the best because you can kind of be very loosey-goosey and not even have a plot ready. But the other piece being like I've had to go back and annotate ggplot2s. And so this is really nice for adding like color blind friendliness, um, a title, a subtitle, labeling your axes, like really important stuff like that, that typically gets skipped over when you're kind of doing EDA. So then you can come back and like take your EDA plot and add to it. Like maybe if we get rid of actually all of this, we take this aesthetics. Like this is how I would have probably coded it, like that. But instead, let's see if it will revise for us. Yeah. And then, you can just run this like um within since I'm inside my script, we basically broke down all those barriers that I was talking about when I first started the talk, like switching back and forth between some other browser application, copying and pasting code. Chores kind of does all that for you, kind of built on top of Elmer.
There's a couple of questions about kind of evaluating the code that is produced. So Curtis asked, could you also evaluate the code to make sure it works as part of your chore, or is that something that would be beyond the scope of a chore?
Um, that's a good question. I guess you might be able to, and like it's so hard for me to keep up track of all the different stuff that Simon's working on. So I'm glad that he's here, but there's like a vitals package I haven't even used yet. But I'm trying to think like if you could pair that with like a suffix uh chore of some sort.
Yeah, so right now, Chores doesn't do any evaluation of the code when it provides that refactor. Um, And I think part of the thought there is like chores is an interface to doing small enough pieces of work that hopefully you can look at it and determine whether it's correct from the get-go. And also for something like ggpal2, you have the ability to run it yourself if you decide it's like safe to run in your context. There is an example of an evaluation with vitals on how well different models can use chores, and I can drop a link to it here. But the thought was that hopefully once some local models are good enough to power chores, like Frank was talking about, often the ones that you can run on your laptop are so bad that it's honestly a net slowdown to use them. I'm hoping that that eval will help us realize it when some smaller models are powerful enough.
Yeah, I have the issue of either I'm taking a really small LLM that works fast enough and it just produces junk, or the opposite where you're running a model that can handle it, but it's so slow that I could have already figured it out on my own anyway. So yeah.
So Frank, have you found that there are some models that you can run locally that are workable for you, or is it really like they're either too slow or not powerful enough?
So Gemma 3 is like pretty good. Um, and I'm really interested in like a few of the new Quinn models. There's a Quinn 3 VL that I haven't tested, but like a lot of my examples with Cusco were with Quinn 2.5 VL, and it does a pretty good job. Um, I've tried like GPT OSS. It's super slow. Like they say they can run on a laptop or a phone. I was like, there's no way. Um, but like I try to get below 70B and try to push like some model that's like between 70 and 4B parameters, and um, it's kind of hit or miss. I've tested a few like Mistral local models with ggpal2. Maybe I could like put together an article or something on like some local models that work, some that don't, because I do a lot of testing with them. I'm not sure about you, Simon, if like you've been testing local models much, or if it's just mostly like Anthropic or anything like that.
A little bit, yeah. When I use them day to day, I almost always use a cloud hosted model like Anthropic or Gemini. Um, and at the time when I was working on chores more actively, this was like a year ago, it really seemed like there wasn't anything powerful enough and snappy enough that you could run on your own laptop. A year later in LLM AI space time, I feel like we must be there, or we must be quite close. And especially if we could like fine tune a smaller model like a 4B or an 8B with a bunch of examples of how to respond to this sort of query. Then the model forgets how to do everything else besides chores, but if it can do chores, then maybe that's useful.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be really cool to do. I've been looking into like fine tuning and would like to see like some other libraries that make it easier in R just to kind of like take a base model and give it a bunch of information. And basically, yeah, like almost Frankenstein this thing to be just really good at ggplot2, forget everything else and use it like that. Um, that was kind of like the idea behind like the fungi experiment too. But every model at the time when I was playing with that idea like failed miserably. So I feel like by now, like we've made some progress. I might be able to use it some. I was also like, I think Ragnar wasn't out yet. I think I could use Ragnar to improve some long context models. But yeah, the local stuff a little bit behind, but it is catching up. There's some like really cool stuff, like the Gemma 3. I think it's also from Google, not Gemini, but Gemma. It's like a tongue twister right now in here.
So there's a question about like applying a chore across a file or maybe multiple files, I think from Stas. If you want to go into greater detail, if you want to come off mic, you could. I don't know if you're there or available. The question is, how easy is it to add something like use company template for all plots? So you wouldn't necessarily be like highlighting code. Um, I don't know if
Oh,
it fits in the chores framework to do something like that.
yeah. Um, like definitely if you had like a template that you added to the chore itself, like in the system prompt, then you could go like basically highlighting each plot by plot, but I don't think there's like an easy way to loop over. It's probably
Oh,
like
I just mean that the going from the natural language to the code, just add plus company ggplot theme.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could probably do something like that for sure.
So
Whether or not,
would I need to dig into your .md file for that, or is there a way to customize the system prompt within ggplot2?
yeah, so if you want to, like if you're doing some natural language process, like adding it to basically the text that I'm typing out and then highlighting and replacing, that would be like one way. But I think what you're mainly trying to do is like edit the system prompt itself. So yeah, you would probably want to fork ggpal2, edit it however you needed to, and then it would be useful for your company.
Okay. Well, yeah, Simon also responded that's probably worth just building a custom chore.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, Frank, maybe it makes sense to just fork ggpal2. But you can also just add these prompts with a markdown file. So maybe you could paste Frank's prompt and then also paste the like use this company template inside of the prompt as well. But either entry point I think makes sense.
And I guess just like thinking more classically about ggplot2, you might just want to use a theme set. But I mean, um, I'll that sounds good. But yeah, but I mean, I think that's a good question about like applying things across entire files. I was wondering, Frank, why you decided to go with a package rather than I think that there's a lot of folks have gone with gists, and there's like a lot more overhead when it comes to a package. I guess the user experience is somewhat better. Um, so just
Yeah,
I was wondering if you wanted to speak to that.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if this is the year of AI or the year of me just building packages, or I'm just kind of been like testing out a lot of different packages and um, starting from packages instead of starting from like a project has been something that I've been doing a lot this year. And I think it's helped me in the long run in a lot of ways. It also helps me like go back to my team's packages and I'm like, okay, I like all I do now is packages. So I feel like I'm ready to just like code inside of packages. So I guess for ggpal2, I was also thinking through like when I first started ggplot, I was learning ggplot. I wanted something to be able to install and be easy to use too. Because when I started using R, like I didn't know what Git was. Like I wasn't downloading a lot of libraries and configuring them myself or anything like that. I just wanted something that you could just like install and load and be able to like have it inside of your IDE. So that's kind of where maybe I deviated from the other folks. Um, but I think, it works pretty well as a library or a GIST. So whichever way you prefer. Um, but yeah, I've
Yeah.
just been such a package person this year.
Yeah, I think I kind of appreciate the like just doing a library ggpal2 call. That seems like really clean. So like I linked to the gallery here to kind of show some of the other approaches, which I think um, the setup is easier to create a gist, I guess. Maybe if I'm mischaracterizing this, then you or Simon can let me know. But and then there's just a little bit more in the way of like kind of what the user needs to do then. Um, is there for chores, is there kind of like a template? I my go-to was like, oh yeah, I was just gonna fork ggpal2 to try to create a first chores package. But I was wondering, Simon, if there was like a template for very bare bones chore.
Yeah, that's funny that you ask, because I don't entirely remember, but we can look. So I just pulled this up, and there's this function prompt new that puts a markdown file in the right place. Um,
Mm.
okay, so if we call this boop, and then we can make it a replacement chore. So whatever selection we make, it will replace the selection. Okay, nice. There is a, I didn't know if there was a template or not. Um, so the two big ideas that I think I would have recommended, one of them is to provide these examples, and Frank said the same thing. It really goes from 0 to 100 when you explicitly spell out like one sort of transformation that you would appreciate. And then there's this sort of boilerplate respond with only the code you need, no backticks, no new lines, um, and this note about new lines within function calls. So a big part of the struggle that you might have writing these chores is um, getting models to only reply with the thing you want rather than surrounding it with backticks or explaining what it did after the fact or anything like that. Just because these models are totally overcooked into to like being helpful and being an assistant, um, rather than following instructions exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I think I did see a few more questions. Sherry, did you want to ask your question about sensitivity and like variation, run to run? If you're there still. Oh yeah, there you
Hi. So I just got a question regarding to like sensitivity because I think like I'm just don't know like if you have ever like tested or have any experience with like if you try to like run chores like multiple times, like how consistent the answer would be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like I don't know the answer always. Like I've tested these out, if you change like the way you word things
Hmm.
just barely,
Hmm.
will get you different code in return. So, and I haven't ran this like 20 times and made like a report of like the different outputs or anything like that. To like show those sensitivities of, hey, here's how the plot code could come out or anything like that. Um, but that's a good question. I don't think I really have an answer for it though.
But I guess like for like coding generation, like you can just scan it and then see like oh it's roughly does the job or like I'm just like modifying on top of the generated templates and I guess that's probably like enough for the purpose, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think kind of you would want to like get your depending on like what kind of chore if you're trying to build your own, is really getting that system prompt fine-tuned. So then you have an idea of what you're going to get in return first.
Hmm.
And then the other piece where I was like, I'm not really sure about is when I'm doing natural language process
Hmm.
for ggplot2 code. That can be a lot different each time. But I think what you really want to do, like if you want to handle some of those differences up front, is getting that system prompt exactly how you want it. And you test it on a few different test cases and it gives you exactly what you want in return. Then you're kind of good to move forward.
I see. I see. Think.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sherry. Um, Matt also has a question. Um, could you show how to set up the options for the chore helper? So I think like kind of the Elmer uh, LLM specification. Like, so I really appreciated the live coding part. I think maybe that Matt is asking about that option, the LLM selection.
Um,
If you want to jump in, Matt, and if you have any.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to go back, but when you were sharing your screen. I was just wondering if you could have just stepped back and shown how you specified, like what model was being used.
Yeah, there's a chores option.
Right.
Let's see here. Um, so I think this is what Simon has assigned in the back end of chores. And the way that you would specify that is like here, I'm just basically using Elmer and then one of their chat functions and then any model. So like for chat Olama, I have Olama installed on my computer. I have 5.4 installed on my computer. I'm good to go with this. I guess a caveat here, Gemini is you would need to set your API token. So within Elmer, if you go into Elmer and you're like, I don't know which chat I want to start off with, like just scroll through Elmer. There's Chat Mistral's free. You can start a free account with that and sign up for an API token. Same with Gemini. There's probably others that I don't know about. Or maybe you have like Open Router or something that hosts all the models. If you had API access to that, that's what you would put in here. And then Chores knows um, which Elmer chat to call. So if you're going to use one of these cloud providers, um, you're going to have to set the environmental variable, which is like the API key that you get. Um, and there's information on every single one of these, like inside the references of Elmer, and there's a key code that you have to use to assign these API keys. So um, if you kind of like refer to the Elmer, decide on which like provider you want to use, then you would assign it like this. But I've used quite a few local models, and then Mistral does a good job, I think, anyway. And I think it's like Lee Chat if you want to sign up for Lee Chat, the chat. And then there's, of course, Gemini, which I think is a really powerful model that you can use for free. So if you're not using like private information that you don't want to leak onto the web, then I would definitely try using Gemini for this.
Yeah, that's helpful. I feel like, yeah, a lot of tools now do depend on Elmer, and getting that up and running is like kind of a precursor step. Um, so I think maybe this group could kind of take on just getting up and running with Elmer at some point. Um, and we don't necessarily have to make the assumption that folks do have Elmer working.
Yeah, for sure. That's where I was like, I didn't know. I've been thinking about this talk for like 4 months, and I didn't know where to start.
Sorry for pushing you so long ago.
Now I've been like procrastinating. I'm like, how do I talk about this? And I was like, do I
Yeah,
just do a
there's some moving
workshop?
parts. Yeah.
Yeah, then, I was like, well, I don't know how many people even know what Elmer is. So I think
Mhm.
Elmer, if you want to start using AI tools in R, I think that's kind of the place to start. And then once
Mhm.
you have that set up, you unlock like all these other libraries that are built on top of it.
Yeah.
So, um, this was a very simple example with Elmer. You first have to initialize like a chat with some model, some provider, and then you can chat with it. Um, so a lot of libraries are now just kind of built off of this interface. So if you understand how this interface works, you can kind of figure out how chores works. Cusco is also built off of Elmer. Um, and then ggpal2 is kind of technically built off of Elmer too.
Yeah. Right. Cool. Well, I think come up on an hour. Maybe we can take like one more question.